Hi everyone, welcome back. In 2022 I saw a post on Facebook regarding electrical items that someone was looking to get rid of. I was very interested and contacted the person straight away with my interest. The items I found most interesting were the Amiga 500 stuff that was laying in the bags. I contacted my friend Moneer, who collected the items for me and brought them up to the Retro Pal HQ. So what Amiga items did we get inside the bags? The first item we found was the power supply for the Amiga 500. Next we found a broken top shell for the Amiga 500, but unfortunately this was beyond repair and was sadly binned. Next we found the expansion cover for the Amiga 500, followed by the 512K expansion card. And thankfully the battery, which is known to leak, was removed. Next we found the bottom shell to the Amiga 500 and that was in great condition. We then found the bottom RF shielding, which had seen better days, with rust and corrosion all around the shielding, and the shield also bent in places. The next part we found was probably the most yellowed Amiga 500 keyboard I have ever seen. This keyboard will really require a retrobrighting. We then found the Amiga 500 motherboard, which we'll come back to in a little bit. And finally we found a few IC clips which were located at the bottom of the bag. So now we know what items we have, let's examine them and let's see if we can fix them. So without further ado, let's begin the restoration. We first start by removing the cling film to reveal the board. So this is our first look at the Amiga 500 board we have. The Amiga 500 had multiple revisions, and this is the revision 5 board made between 1989 and 1990. As you can see, the board is not in great condition. There is corrosion all around the board. The expansion port has corrosion, with the traces eaten away on both sides. One of the large capacitors is holding on for its dear life. The monochrome video port is completely lifted from the board. The ports have corrosion all around them. The Amiga ROM socket has corrosion. Pins are bent. The bottom of the board is not in better condition either, with corrosion all around it, especially in areas such as the ROM, the CPU, and pins to the Agnes clip. I then decided to try and turn on the board using a known working PSU. But was just greeted with a blank screen which was flickering and eventually powered off. I removed the clips, cleaned the sockets and reinserted the clips, but the same issue occurred again. Because of the extent of the damage on the board, I honestly believe that this board is just beyond repair. So I've decided that this board is a no fix. But the clips themselves, I'll be removing them one by one. But we'll keep it as a donor board in case we need something specific on the board, for example a chip or a port that is no longer available or reproduced. I bought a replacement board on eBay for £14. The seller said that the board was not working, but I'm pretty confident we'll be able to get this board fully working once again. The board version I picked is identical to the one that we'll be replacing. The board is covered in dirt and dust. But we'll clean it using some contact cleaner and some IPA. And we go around all the board using a cotton bud to pick up all the dirt and grime on the board and in the clip sockets. Now with the majority of chips now resocketed, we have one chip that needs a repair. So this is the Fat Agnes chip, but as you can see there is a pin that is missing right here, which we need to fix. This repair was very difficult as I needed to use a Dremel to expose the pin. Once the pin was exposed enough, I then tinned the pin with solder and soldered a wire to the pin. With that done, we can now reinstall it to the Agnes socket. I then do a continuity test to see if we're getting a connection between the socket and the Agnes chip. I then test again to see if we get any changes when we power on the Amiga 500. But no, just a blank screen. With the issue still persisting, I then decided to go on to Amiga forums and to ask for some suggestions. There were lots of great comments, some point out it could be a capacitor issue, and some even suggesting that it could be either Paula or the CIA chips. So the next thing I decided to do was to recap the board. I wasn't 100% convinced this would cause the issue, but I decided to go ahead and do it anyway. One by one I removed all the caps and replaced them with brand new ones. With all the caps now removed, I decided to test the capacitors to see if we've got any high or low capacitance in them. All the capacitors I removed displayed all normal readings. But with the age of the capacitors, this is the perfect time to replace them anyway. I then powered on the Amiga board to see if there was any changes in behaviour with the recap, but sadly not. I then decided to get my working Amiga 500, tear it down and use it to test the chips from a non-working board. This will help determine which chips are causing the issue. One by one I removed the working chips from the working board and put the chips from the non-working board in its place, and then power on to see if there's any difference. The first chip I found to encounter an issue was the Kickstart ROM 2.0. As you can see, it just displays a blank screen, very similar to the issue we have with the non-working board. I then proceeded to test the other chips and found an issue with one of the CIA chips. I then replaced the CIA chip with a working one and got the system to boot up on the working Amiga 500. So from what we can tell, there were two defective chips, the ROM chip and one of the CIA chips. So let's now power on the currently non-working Amiga 500 board with working chips to see if we get any progress. So as you can see, we are just getting a grey screen we are. The system will reboot multiple times, it will, because there is an issue with the board. I then used a multimeter to test for any line breaks on the board, but everything checked out fine. So I believe the issue is potentially the RAM, as I've come across this similar issue before, but with expandable RAM causing the issue to the Amiga 500 board. As the RAM is soldered to the board and not socketed, then the process of removing these chips will be a much bigger challenge. So for the time being, let's move on to the keyboard. As you can see, it is very yellowed, extremely yellowed. This is probably the most yellowed Amiga 500 keyboard I've ever seen. The keys and the base of the keyboard is so dirty, and some of the keys, like the F1 key, is slightly bent. There's also corrosion on the bottom of the keyboard, which we'll need to deal with. But the first thing we should do is remove all the keys from the keyboard. One by one we remove all the keys using the keycap puller. This process can take some time, especially with the keys that have metal rods inside of them. And all the springs underneath the keys are put into a safe bag. With all the keys now removed, we give each key a clean, one by one, to remove all the dirt and grime before we can start the retrobrighting process. To retrobrite the keys, I'm going to use this box with tin foil placed around it. The keys themselves will be placed in this bag with hydrogen peroxide put inside it. When doing this process, wear protective gloves at all times. We then seal the bag, place our UV bulb in position, and then cover it with tin foil. We'll continue to check on the keys every 3 to 4 hours. While we wait, let's focus our attention on the base of the keyboard, which is really dirty and grimy. We will definitely need to give this a clean to remove all the dirt and grime that's built up over the years. I first start off by using a can of air with anti-static brush to remove all the dirt and grime. Once most of the dirt is removed, I then soak the base of the keyboard with IPA and then continue to remove the remaining dirt using a cotton swab. So with the top of the base now done and drying, let's focus our attention on the bottom. There is corrosion on the side of the metal shielding. The corrosion is quite thick, so I decided to just use a flathead screwdriver to scrape away all the corrosion. Underneath all that corrosion reveals the metal shielding. I continue to do this for about 20 minutes and use a fine sandpaper to remove any remaining parts of the corrosion. And as you can see, it is looking a lot better than it was before. We now turn our attention back to the retrobrighting. It's been 3 days, so let's see what the results have done. And as you can see, there is a difference in colour on the keys already. But we won't know what the whole result is like until we give the keys a good wash, removing all the hydrogen peroxide away from the keys. Once that's done, we put the keys on a paper towel and allow them to dry. Now the retrobright process had to be done in stages, with some keys being retrobright first and others after. And here is a comparison of the shift keys, one before the retrobrighting process and the other that's just finished the retrobrighting treatment. Because of the time of year, the retrobrighting process has to be done indoors, which means that the retrobrighting process takes longer. Now the retrobrighting process wasn't a complete success. There is streaking on some of the keys, but this is one of the common things that can happen when retrobrighting. It is now time to put all the keys back onto the keyboard base. So here is the big moment. Let's see what the retrobrighting process has done. So here is what we had before, and here is what it is like now. And while it's not perfect, it is so much better than what we had before. I also took the time to repair some of the keys, for example the F1 key now straightened back up. So we're going to end the episode here, but I hope you've enjoyed it. And we'll be back in part 2. But until then, bye for now.